It's your boy JTMM, aka JustTenMoreMinutes, aka the Freakin 10, back again with another Sabaton history. This one, the story of Leslie Allen, or I should say Leslie Bull Allen, and the Ballad of Bull. Now, again, as usual, y'all filled me in on exactly what happened in this battle, excuse me, with Leslie, and how he, went back and kept getting more and more people and helped 12 men survive. But I also noticed that there was a part 2 of this. So if I get through this one quickly today, I do have a 6 a.m. meeting. It's 4:15 a.m. now. I will try to get that recorded before the workday starts. If not, I will do a dual recording for Thanksgiving, at least for here in the U.S. That will be on Thursday with both the part 2 and then inmate 4859, I think it is. I still haven't looked to see which one it is, if it's the other way or not. So, because I want to be fair and cover both. You know, we saw the heartbreaking journey that we went on with Soldier of Three Armies, which still gets me. But y'all know I don't shy away from emotion, right? Now, with that being said, I'm very interested to see kind of the details of this. But at the same time, I'm looking at my monitor and I see Indy has a cup with himself on it. I don't know if y'all see that, but I just kind of looked up from the camera to my main screen, and Indy's cup looks like he has his picture on it. Indy. All right, with that being said, let's switch it up. Let's check it out. I don't know if that comes through on the screen or not. I was looking over at my laptop over here to see. Wow. Indy. All right, let's check it out.
Some of the biggest heroes in war are those men who don't actually fight.
And one of them we wrote a song about, the Ballad of Bull.
Born in 1916, Leslie Allen had a tough time growing up in Ballad in Victoria, Australia. His father was a strict and unforgiving man, and there were domestic violence issues in Allen's childhood. The Great Depression hit the family hard, and when the father abandoned them, Allen and his sister were sent to an orphanage. The work on the farm of the orphanage, however, gave Allen not only an eventual trade, but also steeled his body. And that hard physical work paid off, for his main hobby was Australian football. And he earned his nickname Bull from his technique of simply rushing over the other players. By April 1940, Bull Allen was 23 years old, out of a job, and in need of money. So he joined the freshly formed 2nd Australian Imperial Force. By comparison with the days of the Great War, the Australian military forces were in fairly bad shape, but conscription had been reintroduced in January 1940 after Australia had followed Great Britain into the new war against Germany. Assured by the British government that the ambitions of Imperial Japan presented no immediate danger to Australia's defenses, the 2nd Australian Imperial Force prepared to send forces to the European and African theaters. By September, Allen had undergone his basic training and was to serve as a stretcher bearer. He was too late to fight in France, so the Australians were instead eventually sent to take part in the Western Desert and the Syrian campaign to secure the Allied assets in North Africa and the Middle East. Bull Allen was well liked by his mates. However, he was far from being a model soldier, described as impatient and troublesome. And every now and then he got into trouble with his superiors by not following military conventions or by simply disregarding regulations. Allen had first-hand experience under fire. He carried wounded soldiers from the battlefield, often remaining with them for hours until proper medical help could be provided. But although Bull Allen was a big guy with a strong constitution, the stress of battle took a toll on his psyche. After another incident with superiors, Allen was sent to a hospital in Palestine to be treated for anxiety neurosis, which was better known as shell shock, or nowadays as post-traumatic stress disorder.
PTSD. Sometimes war. You know, I'm going to rewind I hate interrupting Joachim. You know, with the history of his, with dealing with what he dealt with as a child, you know, not just the domestic violence, but then, you know, the abandonment, um, and being sent to an orphanage, man, I can only imagine. Yeah, I was adopted, um, and the issues that that gave me in my teenage years to my early adulthood, um, finding out about it just the way I did and things like that. Yeah, that for me, you know, but I get his thing, but and the that actually tells me a lot about his psyche and how he came to be kind of the person he was, with not wanting to abandon them. Um, you know, I don't want to speak for him, obviously, but that's the first thing that popped into my head, is that fear of abandonment you have, regardless of you being cared for and things like that, because I was adopted by an amazing family, but there's still that part of you that says, hey, your original parents, and whether it was a good situation or not, you're still going to feel abandoned. That's just the way it is. And so I get it, because now he never wants to do that, because I'm the same way with my kids. It's, you know, after my divorce, I took care of my kids. I took full custody of them. I still took care of them to this day, um, because I swore to myself that I would never abandon them like I felt, and give them that sense of abandonment. So for him to do that plays a lot into, at least in my personal opinion, his psyche of why he was the way he was with those other soldiers who he cared for and probably felt a great camaraderie with. So very interesting. Just a thought from my side.
As post-traumatic stress disorder.
Sometimes war is killing, sometimes it's saving lives. From Australia's shore,
Such a good
Bull
song.
Allen went to war. Sometimes war is saving, sometimes it's taking lives. Thanks to one single man, a dozen more survives.
As the threat to the Allies in Northern Africa and the Middle East receded, the Australians were desperately needed back home. The Allies had underestimated the reach of Japanese ambitions. After Pearl Harbor, the Japanese southern offensives of December 1941 and early 1942 pushed across the archipelagos of Southeast Asia. Even the Australian city Darwin came under a Japanese carrier attack in February 1942, and an
Never knew that.
invasion of the Australian mainland seemed to be in the cards if the Japanese advance could not be checked. In late 1942, the already war-weary Bull Allen left the Middle East when his battalion was sent from the desert plains to fight in the humid jungles of Papua New Guinea, alongside contingents from the Netherlands, New Zealand, Canada, and Britain. The Japanese had won some early victories over the outnumbered and outgunned Australians, who repeatedly had to withdraw and cede territory. But by late 1942, the Australians began pushing back. The war along the Kokoda Trail was fought over treacherous terrain in a murderous climate. Waist-high kunai grass and dense undergrowth hampered movement, while the thick tree canopies blocked out the sunlight. Steep razorback ridges crisscrossed the jungle, and muddy swamps engulfed whole large areas. This was no place for grand maneuvers or big flanking operations, but a place for small groups of heavily armed men fighting for each position and dugout. Climate was an enemy in itself. The oppressive heat and the general dampness from the moisture in the air sapped the strength of even the toughest troops in mere days, and poorly planned operations were defeated just by the hostile terrain. Plagued by insects and diseases like malaria, both the Australians and the Japanese suffered more casualties from disease than from enemy fire.
I'm going to ask a really stupid question. because I'm trying to remember. So I love survival shows, right? So, and Survivor Man is one of my favorite ones, with Les Stroud, because he's real. He doesn't fake crap for the camera like some people did. Um, but I'm sitting here thinking about, because when he went to Papua New Guinea, uh, you're in the jungle, because you're also talking about. I'd have to go back, but my first thought is snakes, right? And I realize, with, like in Vietnam, you had what they called the two step, um, which was the type. I think it was the Taipei snake. But I'm thinking about, when you're talking about the jungles, you're also talking about some very brutal wildlife. I'd have to go look it up real quick. I'm gonna do that as I continue to play. But I'm sitting here thinking about what other wildlife was in that area. I really, quite honestly, it's one of the things that I never thought about, as much as I love nature documentaries, of how that affected the soldiers as well in this, is because, as he said, you had malaria, and you had, all these other diseases, that probably took out quite a bit. The conditions were horrible. I gotta look at that and see. Let's keep going.
Often it was almost impossible to evacuate the wounded, as the driving rains turned the few trails into knee-deep mud. Sometimes it could take up to 12 stretcher bearers to transport one wounded man. Initially, Japanese commander Hitoshi Imamura planned to advance his forces all the way to Port Moresby, though he was eventually stopped from this by stiff resistance. After 6 months of bloody fighting and raiding, the Allies had achieved a stalemate, but with the arrival of American General Douglas MacArthur on the scene, plans were made to reverse the positions and drive the Japanese out of New Guinea. MacArthur did not refrain from criticizing the performance of the Australian troops and what he saw as a lack of aggressiveness in advancing against the Japanese. But realistically, MacArthur had little experience of what it meant to fight in the dense, murderous jungles of Papua New Guinea. Soon, the Australian units were reinforced by American troops. With the U.S. Air Force dominating the skies, the combined power of the Allies moved against the Japanese strongholds. The goal was to capture Lae and Salamaua while preventing the enemy from any further advances. By July 1943, the Japanese hold on New Guinea became increasingly desperate, but they were far from beaten. Bull Allen had already been awarded the military medal for rescuing several wounded comrades from the battlefield while under fire, but now he found himself at the foothills of Mount Tambu, a strategic point near Salamaua. Japanese commander had mistakenly thought that the Allies would push directly towards Salamaua and had concentrated his forces on the mountain top. So now his forces were caught out of position. But despite the Allied success in outmaneuvering the enemy, the Japanese were still deeply entrenched and were ready to fight for Mount Tambo with fanatic determination. Bull's battalion slowly ground away at the Japanese positions in the foothills, which soon resembled a moonscape. Trees were knocked down by constant machine gun fire, and the ground was dug up and flung everywhere from all the mortar shells. The Allies managed to secure the lower slopes and ridges, but the Japanese staged several counterattacks to throw them out. The Australians prevailed, though, and once the Japanese had lost hundreds of men in futile attacks, they seemed vulnerable. The Australians prepared to storm the summit.
That angle. Think about trying to pull some of those weapons up that steep of an angle. This is a very interesting battle to me, just because of the terrain itself. Uh, and the reason I brought up the wildlife is exactly what I was trying to remember. So I love snakes. I absolutely love to study them and understand them. And so that's the one I was trying to remember from when when Les Stroud was in Papua New Guinea, and it was the New Guinea death adder, and it was, yeah, because they have a couple of them. Oh, and they do have the taipan. They do have the taipan, which I think they called the two-step Charlie. because its venom was so deadly, you take 2 steps and you. I think that's what they had called it. I mean, I understand that they referred to some of the people like that in a derogatory term, so don't take it as if I'm endorsing it and try to cancel me with all that bullshit. I will eliminate that shit in a heartbeat. But I think that's what they had called it. And so, yeah, they were dealing with not just the terrain in that, but those are some of the most deadly. Is that what, let me see. Yeah. Let me see what they called it here. Because, yeah, that was one of the ones. So the Taipan, it was, yeah, so the Two-Step Charlie was one of the ones that they used it for the nickname in Vietnam. But that same snake was in Papua New Guinea. So I'm sure they dealt with that as well. As far as this battle goes, the reason why I bring up things like that with that he's talking about the malaria, you add the danger, right? You're already dealing with, a rough terrain, the humidity of the jungle, insects that are carrying malaria, having to look, out for enemies themselves, as you saw, right? I mean, you're on a Mount Tambu. I'm sure there were ships sitting off of there, doing sightings to see what movement they could see. And then you've got predators like that, man. Nope.
Must return, unwilling to brag, alive and humble at heart. Now, then back again.
Such a freaking good song.
Under fire, he carried them out one by one.
On July 24th, they advanced, but they were repulsed by the Japanese and took heavy casualties. High command still wanted that mountaintop taken, and another assault was planned for July 30th. This time, they would send in an American battalion. As the Americans headed up the slopes, Bull Allen and the other stretcher bearers, as well as Australian mortar crews, were to stand by and offer assistance if called upon. The Americans attacked, but like the Australians, ran into entrenched Japanese defenders with machine guns and mortars. Casualties were heavy, and the wounded soon littered the field. Allen watched as the wounded cried for help. 2 American medics were shot right in front of his crew by Japanese snipers, so without receiving any orders to do so, Bull Allen stepped forward and ran up the muddy hill and into the chaos of the battlefield. Soon after, he came back down the mountain with a wounded soldier on his back. Already, this was a feat of major courage, but Allen did not stop and ran back once more. And once more after that. Time and time again, he came down the mountain, struggling down the narrow gully of the trail with yet another wounded man on his back. Then he set off again towards the sounds of battle. Supposedly, the other men made bets whether Allen would return another time. His luck had to run out at some point, and yet return he did. The American soldiers described him as a godsend. It was like Allen had some sort of aura of invincibility around him. Calm and seemingly unconcerned for what was going on around him, he just focused on getting the wounded from the battlefield. 12 times Bull Allen went into the fray, and 12 times Bull Allen returned with a wounded soldier on his shoulders. He finally stopped because his body could go on no longer. His sleeves, his trousers, his hat were all in tatters, riddled by bullets and shrapnel, but miraculously, Bull Allen came out untouched. Allen would physically survive all the fighting in New Guinea, but the battle for Mount Tambu further damaged his mental health. After a fight with his superiors in 1944, Bull Allen was discharged from the army for constitutional temperamental instability and emotional retardation with anxiety symptoms. His continuing problem with shell shock was worsening, so he was sent back home to recuperate. It is said that his behavior was erratic, often volatile, and at one point he even stopped speaking. For 6 months, he locked himself away working on an uncle's farm until he finally found the strength to speak again. Slowly, Allen recovered and eventually got married and raised a family. But the trauma of the war never left him. All his life, Alan would suffer from flashbacks and the effects of PTSD, which sadly could not be adequately treated or even properly diagnosed back in those days. Nonetheless, the 12 men whom Bull Allen saved on Mount Tambu remembered and revered him for his deeds long after the war. He received many letters from them and their families, and even Eleanor Roosevelt, America's first lady during the war, wrote him several times. Although Australia has never officially recognized his actions to this day, the U.S. awarded Leslie Bull Allen the Silver Star, one of their highest awards for gallantry and bravery in the face of the enemy. And had he been an American soldier, he would likely have won the Congressional Medal of Honor at least once for his bravery that day.
At least this one's happy, right? I mean, in the sense of what he was able to do and get recognized for is not for the mental trauma that he went through. Because even to this day, I don't know that they truly know how to treat it. Because I truly think, quite honestly, it's untreatable. There's things you can do to help, to help with the anxiety of it. But these guys see things that the average human will never be capable of understanding or seeing. We see these pictures just kind of through these older videos, or through the movies. But these guys lived it, right? And anybody that goes into war, whether, you have family or friends that have ever been in war, or if you were there yourself, those are images that us as an average human will never. We can imagine it from a sense of picturing it in our heads, but the feeling to witness it, and I think that's truly why you see so many soldiers that come home and truly struggle with the normal lives, simply just some of the things that they saw and dealt with. You think about just trauma you have that of fears you have in your everyday life, and then magnify that by a million. And that breaks my heart for him. I'm thankful for every bit of service that these people do. And so when I say thank you for your service, I take all of that into consideration when I say it, because, man, the things that these people go through for the rest of us, some of it's unfathomable. And this breaks my heart for him. I'm happy that he received the honors that he did. And I think Indy's right. I think he would have won that, which obviously makes me emotional just because of what that Medal of Honor stands for. But it's cool to see that he was recognized. It got Indy as well. The song Swallow Heart. That's such a freaking damn good song.
Well, this is an interesting song for me, Per, not just musically and historically. It's because unlike most of your songs, I did not know the story of this until I heard the song and knew the song. I mean, I knew about Audie Murphy before I knew who Sabaton was, things like that. But I didn't know this, so this was a fairly new story for me. So how did it come about that you wrote just this song?
It's a bit odd song. I mean, Joachim started to write this on tour. He was playing it, and I was really convinced that it has a big potential, but it's a bit... we didn't know how we would orchestrate this song at all. For this, we asked a couple of good friends of us, and two guys from our hometown, Daniel and Philip. We have been doing a couple of things together over the years, and Daniel was actually playing keyboards in Sabaton a long time ago. They had some ideas about how to orchestrate it in a way of making it more like a ballad and an anthem than a proper metal song. And we thought, okay, could be interesting. And when the song was ready, it was really difficult for us to find any topic for it. We said, we need a heroic topic, but it needs to be something that is not really connected to war, because it doesn't carry that feeling. So after doing a lot of research about like peaceful heroes or non-fighting heroes in war, we came with Leslie Allen, that the song is about, and we like the story a lot, and it fitted so well into the lyrics. This song is like mixed, appreciated by fans because of the way it is orchestrated, the way it sounds.
Brilliant.
It doesn't really typically sound like Sabaton. Some people really love this song, some people don't. It's a song we never performed live yet.
I was going to ask if it was something that you performed often live or not.
No. It's very difficult as well for us to figure out how we could possibly perform it live.
That makes sense. I'll rewind it back a little bit. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's such a non-metal song, and I don't mean that in any insult, but it is truly like this piano ballad. So I get it. But if you take it in the sense of the story and the story they're telling, man, it's a damn good song. I mean, when y'all requested it, I was expecting, obviously, even with the story, I was always expecting metal from Sabaton, but also knowing kind of what they did with the Christmas Truce, right? With him and the piano. As soon as I heard those first couple of bars, I was like, okay, where are they going to go with this, right? And with nothing else coming in but keeping it simple is such a beautiful thing for this type of story, because it's not that hard-hitting war type of anthem, right? This is a story of a courageous man who really knew nothing but how to not worry about himself but put others first. And it's that, I truly believe it's that fear of abandonment and never wanting anybody to feel what he felt as a kid. If I go psychologically, that's truly, I understand that probably a lot better than most people. And so to me, yeah, I think that song fits him perfectly.
As well for us to figure out how we could possibly perform it live. We are in contact with descendants of Leslie Allen down in Australia. We thought maybe if we come to Australia at some point we will have to play it somehow, and we have been talking a little bit how we could possibly orchestrate the song.
Well, speaking of touring and any future tours of Australian things, now, the last time you and I met, we were in Minsk doing some filming because you were just about to go off on tour, just about to go to Eastern Russia to start. You started in the far east of Russia, right?
Yeah, in Yukno-Sakhalinsk.
And then your tour was canceled. Now, how far had you gotten in Russia before it was canceled, and what did that mean for you and your crew, and how has it affected the band and stuff? So since the actual cancellation.
We were pretty much halfway through the tour, and we made about half of the shows. We were supposed to do 18 shows, all in all, and we made 9 out of them. And now we have rescheduled the rest for November, but it was a tough decision, but nothing, it was beyond our control, of course, when we had to go home. And since then, the Sabaton machine, the touring machine of Sabaton has been standing still. No more shows for a long time. In the middle of the Russian tour, we were supposed to announce another arena tour all across Europe. And it was something we first postponed and thought maybe we can release it in May or something, and we still keep the dates on hold. But somewhere in April, I realized that we will not be able to do an arena tour in the time as we planned in 2021. So we had to cancel that. But there's a big chance that the next show we're gonna do is when we are back in Russia, it's where we ended, and then that's where we start.
You start
You know, here's what I truly love is when someone is enthralled with their career. If you watch kind of when he was talking about them canceling the shows, and you could see kind of that pain in his eyes, his nose flared a little bit, and he wasn't very happy. But as soon as he talks about rescheduling it, you see his eyes light up. And that you just have to appreciate that passion. You really do. These guys, you know, you don't, for me personally, right? Y'all, as fans of Sabaton, eh, you know, y'all have seen these live shows and you've seen these concerts. I've seen snippets of them, right? Just with the 30-year war, um, and one of the other ones, I forget what it was. But to me, I honestly, I get so enthralled with this history part of it, I forget about them like touring and doing these big concerts sometimes, because they fascinate me with the history side of it. And so when he thinks about it, then I think about it, and then I start just beaming like, oh man, I can't wait to see this. Just from the emotions that get me in a song, that all I see is a lyric video or these discussions with history, and it just brings up so emotion. Dude, I'd be a crying freaking baby at one of their freaking concerts, people. Man. Maybe I shouldn't review those. Y'all know I will, don't worry. Y'all know I'm hooked on Sabaton, okay? I'm a fan for life now. Much like Nightwish and Ginger and The Warning, Sabaton is right up there. I mean, I could go name all the bands that I've been reacting to. Let's keep going before I have an hour-long video here.
It's
See,
where
look
we
at that
ended,
smile.
and then that's where we start.
You're starting Yekaterinburg, eller? Or
We will not start in Ekaterinburg. The tour has changed a little bit routing due to the availabilities. It's very difficult to rebook something during this time. Very difficult
Yeah, sure.
to get anything done. There are some venues that don't exist anymore. There are promoters that have gone bankrupt. There are agents that don't work anymore.
Yep.
It's a lot of things that just doesn't exist anymore.
But what about like you know, touring insurance and stuff for things that happen? How does that work with the Russian shows? I mean, there must be insurance for something a tour this big.
Well, at the time when Corona hit, it was very difficult to have an insurance for pandemics.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Very few people actually
Yeah,
had that.
Yeah.
In the terms of the Russia, there was no insurance for this. We have to work in good faith and come back with a plan and make sure that agents, promoters, band, everybody, crew members, that it keeps on. In this case, we pay the full crew salaries to the guys, even for the canceled shows and stuff like that. Not leaving anybody behind, and we sought immediately to find a solution for the promoters to regain their lost profits by booking new shows where there was a possibility to make up for the damage caused.
I'll rewind again. I didn't know if Indy was going to cut and pause. That gets me emotional because that shows how caring these guys are, right? I mean, just in the fact of the loss that a lot of these people, you know, you talked about, as he said, right, the agents. And I know this is off topic of Leslie Allen, but obviously they're covering it. But you think about the lives that were touched during these lockdowns and shutdowns and all of those things, whatever you want to call them, and how greatly it affected people, right? Man, yeah, people losing jobs left and right, and I can only imagine with these guys, you know, with them living on the road, and that's where a lot of the money comes from. That, wow, to pay these people salaries, right, and make sure that their families are okay. Not everybody can afford to do that. right? Or planned for that, or things like that, because of just living check to check and, not as successful as other people. But for these guys to do that just speaks volumes about their character. Not that I'd ever questioned it, right? I mean, we know what they are as far as musicians and caring about history, but that just takes it to a whole nother level where you're talking about from a superstar persona to just one human caring for another. That just ups that respect level even higher for them.
Where there was a possibility to make up for the damage caused. And I think we succeeded pretty well in this.
Well, that's really cool, and it'll be great if you guys actually can finish the Russian tour, obviously later this year. So, not least because people will get to see you play, all the people that wanted to see you, especially in all those towns over Russia. Good luck getting out of Moscow and getting back home after all this time. I'm sure it'll feel great to get home, and I'm happy that I could actually get back to my place in Stockholm eventually. All right, well, that is it for today, but we will see you next time.
Here on the Sabaton History Show.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
That's an awesome image.
Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you everybody for supporting. And those who don't do it, click the bell, subscribe, and become a patron. Thank you very much.
Per is so much more I want to say just not as I hate to use the word obnoxious as Joachim, but Joachim just has that, as a front man would, just that larger than life personality. Get the fuck out of here. There's a side to that of just how much you can tell he enjoys that. Yeah, I love that. But Per is just so humble, right? And not that Joachim isn't, but Per just gives off that just quiet, humble nature, and you just can't help but love the guy. What a story. A lot of things play into this psychologically, like I mentioned, right? And the fact of his childhood and that, going to the orphanage and then into the military and having that sense of belonging. And when you have that and you find that belonging, you latch onto it. Again, just my humble opinion, but I truly believe that played a huge part into who he was as a human. And it makes a lot of sense as to how he would struggle once he left, not just because of what he saw, but just not having that sense of belonging until he was able then, as they mentioned, to kind of refine himself and realize and attach himself to something else, and then find something else that he can attach to so that he doesn't feel that. And I only speak for that, and I don't want to speak for him. I speaking up from my personal, right, of just what I felt as a child, as a teenager, into an adulthood, and even it still bugs me to this day, regardless of what facts are, right? Is that you latch on to things, and it's what makes people successful, because they get entwined in it, like my channel, right? I'm 100% invested into it, and when I left it that first time, it always was sitting in the back of my mind, my original subs, right? And how they were doing and what was going on. And so coming back and seeing the people come back and support gets that sense of belonging and wanting to see those smiles and hear about those smiles and things like that. So it makes perfect sense to me of his mentality as a soldier as to why he was the way he was. So just my take on it. I mean, just from experience, and I could be 100% wrong. Lord knows I've been wrong before. But this one I'm pretty confident in. I really am. Let me switch it up, give you my final thoughts. At the end, they talked more about the shows than they did necessarily Leslie Allen. he there's a mindset, right? When you think about having those bullets flying around and not caring and just going and grabbing these wounded, and to do it 12 times, right? I, I, that part is the part that just becomes larger than life, is because you think about the terrain, you think about the mud, you think about all of that, and then grabbing these guys that have been shot, you know, to what extent you don't know, to grab them, carry them over that same terrain, worrying about things like losing your life from a bullet, not knowing if you're next. And just, man, hard to imagine. And I'm happy that he was able to get married and have a family. And that there were descendants to help tell this story. Or not tell the story, but at least, get in contact with the band and appreciate the story that they tell. Absolutely amazing. Wow. All right. That's going to do it for this one. Let me give some shameless plugs as usual. If you like the video, hit that like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And if you like the content I put out, hit that subscribe button. Remember, and I can't believe I'm taking this from the other guys that said it. It is free 99. Costs nothing for you. All you gotta do is hit that subscribe button. I'll never ask you to turn on notifications and all that. I've loved this journey. When I started my reaction channel, quite honestly, if I can just go on for a second here, is, it was music, right? But I've always been fascinated by history itself, as I kind of said, regardless of remembering a lot of it accurately. But it's something that's fascinating. So this journey, and y'all helping me down this journey, has been unbelievable. And for the ones that give me those longer details, I could give names and names, it just brightens my day. And so when y'all did that yesterday on this, and I started to see kind of what they talked about, as they didn't necessarily touch all about it in the song, made me just that much more excited to see this. And so to see this and see this larger than life character, but from a very simple human, cool story. So inmate 4859, again, I could be getting the numbers mixed up, but I think that's the number. That will be on Wednesday, and then I'll go ahead and record Thursdays, because it is Thanksgiving. I may record that on Wednesday and get those out. So please stay tuned. Always more content, more songs to cover, more history to cover. And, if we get through all the Sabaton history and they haven't put out anything, hey, we can go cover other historical stuff, right? On Indy's channel. I'm happy to react to that as well. And we can have discussions from there, because it just fascinates me. Y'all have me hooked on this. Anyway, that being said, y'all know what to do. I don't have to say it. Like, subscribe, share, all of those things. And always remember, if someone asks you to stop what you're doing, don't ask for 1, don't ask for 2, and certainly don't ask for 5. Ask for JTMM, just 10 more minutes. I'll see y'all later.